I'm Amber Furman, and this is the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast. If you want comfort, this is not the place for you. If you're ready to understand what makes smart, capable, successful people, including you, keep repeating the same patterns, this show breaks down human behavior, drawn from real conversations and years of studying what makes people create change so that you can make better decisions, have better conversations, and get better results. So let's dig in and break the bullshit that's been running the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast. Today on the show, I have a great friend of mine, Lance Hendron, and I'm so excited for this episode for a few different reasons. First of all, it's always kind of vindicating for me when I can sit down and have a conversation with another attorney about human stuff that sometimes we don't get to talk about every single day. Second of all, I know when I wrote my book, I remember thinking that authors were kind of this unique thing that I could never become, and then all of a sudden I was one. And Lance is a criminal defense attorney who is running for judge here in Las Vegas. And I think a lot of people, including myself before I became an attorney, look at judges as these superhuman people who are in some way different than ourselves. And in all reality, we're all just humans doing the best that we can in any situation. So I'm really excited to talk about kind of the humanity in the legal profession and in the judicial world and on the campaign trail, as well as just, get to know Lance more as a human being. And I'm excited for you to do the same. So with that being said, Lance, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amber, for having me.
I'm so excited. So one of the things I always am interested to know, I feel like attorneys have a couple different buckets we're in. We either always wanted to be attorneys or we kind of stumbled into the profession. How did you decide law school was for you?
I kind of stumbled into it, was wrapping up undergrad, decided to look and see, hey, what some alternatives were in life. And one of those was looking at law school and becoming an attorney. I actually took a year off after undergrad before I went to law school. And then even in law school, things were kind of a changing process. Initially, I actually was looking into water law, and then what ended up stumbling on me is doing the criminal defense work.
Okay. Well, let me go back and ask this. So was your family attorneys? Was anybody in your family attorney, or did you know anything about the profession before you decided it's what you wanted to do?
None of my families were attorneys. There was a mentor of mine, Rex Bell, who was the head district attorney out here in the mid-'80s and mid-'90s. And I knew him when I was a young kid. So he kind of at least had that door available. And I had reached out to him going through undergrad, and then even helped me out once I finished law school, preparing for the bar exam. I mean, I started, my actual practice started in his small office room, and I was on his sofa. I'd do his morning court runs, and then he would leave in the afternoon hours, because this was towards the tail end of his career, and then just do my practice in the afternoon. And when he passed away, I was able to still be in that same office, and that sofa is still there. So it's a reminder to me of just the humble beginnings.
Yeah. What about the legal profession is exactly what you thought it would be?
That's a good question. It is, and it isn't. So I think some of the big things are, you're going into court, you're handling cases that are an issue. But I think the overall experience itself, in particular, the emotional aspect that comes into play, how we as attorneys are driven to succeed, and then also wanting to do the very best for our clients. And sometimes there's things that are favorable in your position when you're starting out with a case, and other times there's a lot of difficult hurdles that need to be overcome. And so I think the emotional, psychological aspect, it's one of those things you can see it, but you don't actually know how it feels until you're actually in it.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you said that, because I think my advice so much to people who are thinking about law school and I remember going back a little bit in my story when I was looking for somebody to write a reference letter for my law school application. I remember asking my political science professor in undergrad to write my recommendation letter, and his response was, "I don't help people ruin their lives." And I thought that was such a rude and horrific response. And then you get in the profession and you're like, I really wish there was this almost requirement to just live in the legal world for a little bit before you spend all the time, effort, and energy going to law school, because Perry Mason and Law and Order, isn't it?
No.
It's just not.
The interesting thing, I think, is whether it's just who we are as the individual, regardless of whatever profession we may have taken, or if it was kind of the profession itself that kind of got us into that fashion. But maybe it's a mixture of both. But definitely it requires a lot of, just in addition to the legal aspect, it requires a lot of being able to be mindful, setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff where, we've gone through all this education, we know how to do all the legal stuff, but then rewinding to ourselves back into our earlier days of just being able to, process the little things, at least for me, has gone a long way.
Yeah, I don't think that, well, first of all, I don't think education does a lot for us as people to begin with. Law school definitely doesn't do very much for us other than help us pass the bar. And I think...
And read briefs,
and
read
briefs
cases.
And research. And I mean, definitely like where to find information. Some of the things, though, that I really wish were dug into a little bit more in law school are kind of the practice management. Like, I wish that they talked more about how to run a business. But the human aspect that you're talking about, I mean, I think... it might have been the public defender's office, don't quote me on that, I think it was, that maybe about 6 years ago did a continuing education on compassion fatigue. And it was the first time I had ever heard that term. And I was like super intrigued by that, because we do put our needs on hold oftentimes because we're invested in the success of this client's case. And sometimes, as much as I hate to say it, it's not even about the client, it's about our ego of not wanting to lose a case. But we do have these very real human elements on the other side that, number one, we kind of feel like we can't show because nobody wants to see it. And number two, we're not taught how to deal with it anyways. We're just thrown to the wolves and saying, okay, figure it out and try not to crash and burn.
100%. And the other thing, and I can't remember the exact term, but it's almost like we mold ourselves into being, what we're practicing, being this professional, if you will. And it almost kind of contradicts the aspect of, hey, we're humans at the end of the day. We make mistakes, we have our faults, and trying to balance all of that, because it does become just, again, a grind, if you will.
Yeah.
Over the long term, it definitely takes its toll.
I laugh because part of the reason I went to law school is in some sort of closeness to my dad. My dad passed away when I was 18, and one of the last conversations I had with him was about how he thought I'd make a good attorney. And I wanted to go to school for computer programming. So I was like, I'm not doing this attorney stuff. Like, that sounds horrible. I don't know an attorney that has friends. And I like friends and I like people, and you hear all the bad attorney jokes, and that just sounds awful. And then I went to school for computer programming, and my dad passed away, and my life kind of spiraled. And then I was looking for some sort of connection to him, and law school, I think, became it. But I remember something my dad said about why I wouldn't like computer programming. And he said, you're just going to be in front of a computer all day. Like, you need to be dealing with people. And I'm like, now I understand my dad had this wild misunderstanding of what attorneys do. Because I feel like I'm in front of a computer more as an attorney than I ever would have been as a computer programmer.
Emails.
All day, briefs, the writing, everything. And then to the extent we get to go to court, I still feel like we're still in front of a computer in one way or another. For you, what was the things that surprised you the most about the profession? The things that were not what you expected them to be?
So probably the standpoint of, and this could just be probably also as far as just growing up, becoming more mature, understanding the life experiences. But when you have these cases, again, there's that vested interest. You develop, I think, through having an understanding of, where your case is at. You've got to understand your client, and understanding your client's background and their family history, perhaps their trauma. That's something where it was like really kind of new to me, because I'm basically absorbing a lot of that and putting it into myself. And so to process that, it is a lot. And then knowing that, you just don't have one client, you have a good amount of clients. And then even in looking at it from the aspect on the other side too, because again, it's you're dealing with conflict. And so there's basically two sides to this story, whatever you want to call it, and then recognizing the other side and the impact it has on that other side as well, and what that struggle is. And again, kind of just circling back, it's one of those things that you can watch all the TV, you can read all the books, whatever you want to do, but until you're actually placed in the position of having to deal with these actual issues, I can't really describe it other than just being prepared and working on myself on a day-to-day aspect. Because it's one day you think you've got to solve, heck, one courtroom that same morning you think you're on cloud nine. You go right next to the next courtroom and you just get beat the living heck out of you.
Yeah.
And so just managing that too, there's a lot of ups and downs.
I've always said that being a criminal defense attorney taught me to redefine success really quickly. Success doesn't necessarily mean keeping my client out of jail every day.
We take our wins as we can, and we kind of just put it into our mind what we're trying to achieve. We can't always hit the home runs in that regards. Yeah,
I think a couple things that have been said to me that really hit, and I'm curious what your experiences with this have been. Somebody said to me a few years back on a podcast, they were a postgraduate of another profession, and they said, I think grad school trained the human out of me. And I'm curious what your experience has been with how you've maintained a sense of humanity with your clients when it's so easy to look at facts and put them in a legal box. How do you maintain that human connection with them to make them feel heard and understood that you care about the outcome of the case?
I think that's the growth aspect. I think that's, when you get with the attorneys themselves that have been it for the long term, I think it's a skill that we just inherently start to develop, because what you start to realize is, again, you can do all the briefs, all the legal stuff, and even with the facts itself, but being able to work with your client, that individual, whomever it might be, that you're advocating for, as the time goes on, you start to have that skill ability to find a way to connect, because that's really important. It gives you the opportunity to even ask your client the questions that they may not be thinking of that are important. And so when you start to talk and get a better connection with them, I think that's one of the things where it separates me from when I first started out. And it's like, okay, hey, do I know these elements of the offense? Do I know these point structures? And trying to memorize all that, but then missing the component of, I represent a human here. And again, I'm dealing with this conflict, and I have to be the zealous advocate for them, and just trying to develop that bond to assist through the process.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the most surprising things was those times that, like, you represent a client that's charged with some really bad stuff. And you're like, dude, but I kind of like this guy. Like, as a person, like, I could totally see how this life just got derailed. And the balance between good people make really bad choices, and then the consequences for those choices that have to inevitably be paid, and the human emotions that are involved from the family and the defendant and the victims and all of it, it's exhausting.
That's why I'm constantly up in the middle of the night. Because it's the same thing, you're doing the best that you can, and certainly you just kind of scratch your head and say, man, I wish I didn't have to be involved in this process from the jump. And then just thinking about the best ways that you're there for your client. And also, like you've indicated, kind of recognizing with that conflict, the other side of that argument, and being mindful of that too, not letting it impact your ability to be that zealous advocate for your client. But I do think it's important, just from the standpoint of, when you're trying to give background about your client, you have to also recognize some of the things on the other side as well. And again, it's just one of those things where, hey, I'm up in the middle of the night, all of a sudden something comes. It's either that or deadlines. Those are the two things for me, is the client's case itself, and then also just general deadlines.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think one of the things that stuck out the most to me when I started to step back from the profession, you mentioned the word conflict a couple of times. And I don't think that I understood just how much I was constantly preparing for conflict. Do you notice in your personal life sometimes that you've got to check yourself and be like, okay, I'm not in an adversarial situation right now, I can chill?
100%. So when my wife, for instance, is asking me to put a dish away, it's not for a purpose of, hey, trying to get in an argument. It's just put the damn dish away. So taking that hat off, that's another, process that you've got to work through. And it's just probably the advice that I would give to the younger attorneys as well, is you don't always have to be on that defensive or argumentative mode. Sometimes just staying quiet and listening, and then in your own head allowing that to process, can make a problem that was non-existent be solved instantaneously.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned real quick when I started this second business that I had no idea how to collaborate, because every conversation I was in as an attorney was, you want this, I want this. What are you not telling me that you're holding on to? What am I not telling you that I'm holding on to in case we can't reach an agreement? And then you get into a business where maybe you want to build a collaborative relationship with somebody, and you're like, wait a minute, how do I do this?
Right. It's conflict everywhere. And that's one of the things, I think what we're trying to achieve, maybe ultimately long-term, certainly is success in all of our cases. Knowing that sometimes, again, you can't hit those home runs necessarily, and then just doing the best you can. But therein lies the problem, because another thing that's constantly on my mind is, hey, am I doing the best that I can for any given task? And the problem with that is there's numerous task objectives that you might be trying to achieve in life, and again, we're all human, so it's that burnout phase, and trying to battle, like we're talking about, being that professional and saying, well, hey, this doesn't impact me. I'm stronger than that. I'm not weak. I could take on anything.
Yeah.
And that's and maybe that's for each and every one of us, just in certain context, a life process that we're going through.
Yeah. What do you think were the biggest kind of identity shifts or hard truths you had to learn about yourself in this profession? Whether it's something you thought you were that maybe you learned you weren't, or somebody that you thought you weren't that you learned you were and had skills that you didn't know you had?
Probably, when I think about it, the one thing is getting the objective achieved in every situation the way that I want it done. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're younger, there is, and it's a good thing, you're not necessarily exposed to a lot of the hurdles where, hey, you don't necessarily have any control of it whatsoever. And so I think just recognizing from that identity is just have that mind frame, try to achieve the best, reach for the sky, but then also have something to work on where life happens. Mm-hmm. And being able to just navigate that aspect. That's one thing I think identity wise is it's amazing, and continue to having those ambitions, but then also working through the trial and tribulations that you're not going to have any control over. Because look, I think again, when you're growing up, you watch TV, whatever your involvement is, a lot of the movies, it's always like there's that beginning, middle, end. And at the end, the beginning issue always seems to be resolved favorably for whatever that came about.
Yeah.
Life doesn't work that way. And
No.
so that's one of the identity things I think that comes into play for me.
What do you think? So sometimes I know this question falls on deaf ears because we don't care about something till we care about it. And we normally can't care about it till it affects us in some way. What do you wish that people that were going through law school now, that were getting ready to enter the workforce, knew or were willing to accept about the profession or themselves or what it needed to take to be successful?
To be easy on yourself. I think law school, by its very nature, I think how we've just kind of got this preconceived notion, probably from hearing from other attorneys, and I think like a lot of TV and movies that have a law school component, you always see that professor saying, hey, look to the person to the left and to the right of you, and what you're going to end up finding out is that one of you is not going to be there, or two of you are not going to be there. And so I think it's one of those things where you kind of come into a play of like, hey, if I made it out this far, then too, I've got it locked down. I must know everything. And that's not necessarily the case either. You achieved an objective, but then just, I guess, being humble on it too. Because you're going to come across a lot of life situations, whether it's, professionally, with the other attorneys, with your clients, with the court, or even on the home front, that you just have to be able to identify with, it's not always going to work and go your way.
Yeah.
And be willing to accept that. And perhaps there's, again, a greater good for that long term. But I think in law school, it's just so that competitive nature. And then, hey, if you've gotten that far, and then they talk about the bar exam and how many days it is. Well, I did that, I can do anything kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because you think you get it. Like you do mock trials, you do all this stuff, and you're like, I've got this in the bag. And then you've got like a real human sitting next to you, and you're like, oh, they didn't tell me how to deal with real people. It was like Saved by the Bell mock trial shit, right?
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've got like Joe from, Henderson sitting next to you, and you're like, whoa.
And not only that,
human.
Yeah, not only that too, and that's probably a good point. In particular, going in like through the courts and having to deal with a lot of the intangible factors. I mean, you can go into court and you can have a cordial client. Somebody, in the back could be given a hard time for whatever reason in the gallery. The judge, may just, for whatever reason, there's some potential issue that's come into play. So you've got to be able to really just know that there, again, are certain things you're not going to be able to control, that you're going to be exposed to. And then dealing with that whole struggle of, hey, I can do anything and everything that comes my way, versus the humanity aspect of just saying I'm human and I'm doing the very best that I can.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've always admired about you, as I've gotten to know you throughout our friendship, is this harmony that you have between being an attorney and your family life, and then you go out and you volunteer and you're involved in these organizations. And I think often, especially my experiences where I didn't have a family, and my law school career was really like the only thing I was proud of in my life at that time, we often find that high performing people tie everything that they care about into this professional bucket. And if that goes away, they have no idea who they are. How have you maintained this sense of identity outside of the courtroom?
It's a work in progress. Just being candid, I do as much, I think, that as I possibly can, just for perhaps like a greater good. But also the difficulty of that, and perhaps, again, just using some of these keywords of like being mindful, being able to set boundaries. It's a difficult thing to work with, because sometimes I lose focus on other responsibilities in my life. There's certainly Lance that's out there, the attorney in the public and doing the best that he can. But then, when that's done, just that human nature is, I get tired. I get to the point where you kind of want to have that ability to be unengaged and kind of do that disconnect. So I appreciate the kind words that you're saying. And again, I'm trying to really just help out. It's really just, I think, allowed me an opportunity to see perspectives from different angles and that maturity aspect that I don't think I had when I was younger. But also trying to recognize that there's Lance that does that and then gets away from it to be on the home front. And then when you bring up just how it makes our, I guess, identity, with what we do, that is a scary thing, right? There's friends and colleagues of mine that, and I think we've seen in our profession that they do this, and whatever the circumstances for me happen is what it is, but they go through it until they pass away. I mean, we have some of those legends that were out there.
They were literally carrying their oxygen tank to court.
Correct. Yep. And so, you just wonder to yourself, they're giving it their all. They're amazing attorneys as well, but we just get so interlocked in that profession, which again, it's a thing you got to juggle because they care for their clients. They're some of the best attorneys, mentors of mine. And so you get it from that aspect, but again, it's the juggling of also taking that identity away to just be you. Mm-hmm. And so, it's, again, I think a lot of the questions that we're discussing upon kind of like give us thoughts of what to think about, but I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. I appreciate it because there's a lot of like self-reflection here on, just talking about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think like, when you say like just being you and just figuring out like who you are, the first thought that popped in my head was like how long it took me to believe that was enough. Like so much of this profession, people want to be around you because of what you can do for them, what you're going to get from them, what are the guarantees you're going to give me, the expectations of success in this profession. And I remember talking to a friend of mine whose daughter came home from school crying, and she was a teenager. And she goes, "What are you crying for?" And she's like, "Well, we were talking in school about what we wanted to be when we grew up, and everybody had these answers about wanting to be a doctor or a lawyer and I don't know. I just want to be me. Like, can I just be me?" And I don't know when, as high-performing individuals, like us, stopped being enough. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, 1,000%. Again, I think it circles back to sometimes I think we try to interlock our profession is what necessarily makes us, and how scary of a thought that is if at a split second, that's taken away from you. What else do you have? And sometimes you look at it in our younger years, even though there's the maturity aspect, like that young girl, she may actually get it, right? In other words, she just wants to be her.
Yeah.
And so there's certain things that, and again, with our, professional egos, sometimes we're like, like, oh,
I gotta be more than that.
That's a cute response. But it makes a lot of sense, though, too, of just being able to be you. I want to be me. And then that opens the door of, well, who am I? What is me? Again, it's a great balancing process. And it's something that, I try to work on myself and self-reflect a lot more as I get older, in particular, knowing that how finite time is, working with that time that I have, because at the end of the day, you could be, having the most, you've heard these stories, having the most money, being the top, trial attorney, getting all the cases fixed on. And then when you look at it, you kind of circle back and you're like, but I lost a lot of time that could have been placed in other places. So I've just been mindful as I get older. I try to really look at like my parents, that I'm blessed, that they're healthy, talking to them and saying, hello, giving them the hugs, seeing my daughters grow up, and just even, my own health. Because as the years go on, you start to say, man, even this stuff is becoming somewhat limited too. So you just kind of take those blessings in place.
Well, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about this incredible challenge you're taking on. I am always in awe. People have always asked me, would you ever run for judge? And I'm like, there is zero part of me that wants that responsibility. None. Particularly in the immigration world where it's a hired position. I don't want that responsibility. So I am always so in awe of people who, like you, can weigh both sides of a situation and feel qualified to deal with that, because I don't feel like I am. What has it brought up for you as you've gone through this decision to run for judge? Is there, have you had to challenge this, holy crap, what the hell am I doing conversation, or has it felt pretty natural?
I think it's a day-by-day process. I have to keep reminding myself that, because when I had made the decision, it was well thought out. I talked with my family about it, and knowing a lot of the time commitment and energy that was going to be taken away from my family to be put into the campaign process. Again, it's like the life experience, right? You say, hey, it's going to be, tough. Nothing comes easy. And then you get into it and you're like, yeah, this is taking a lot, not even just, certainly there's the aspect of just the pure stamina that you can manage on any given day, but there's only you. And so again, when you're at one given place, trying to introduce yourself, which is again, is an extremely important part of the process. You're not there with the family,
Mm-hmm.
You're not there, and it's going back to that time thing. So that's been something really that I've just trying to process and set some of those boundaries. The other thing too is just when we talk about some of the things that I've done and we talk about the me aspect, for me, for justice court, I think resonates in particular because it's very much, I consider justice court to be the people's court. Mm-hmm. And I view it just from the standpoint of, I think a lot of people are intimidated by hearing of courts in general, thinking to themselves, the highest high of the courts, and there's all these things where you got to go in and know all these various rules and time frames, and hey, how do I talk to this person when I get into the court? But I think justice court at least has to be a lot more open for the public to understand and having access to that justice. Because it's just a lot of day-to-day life situations. It's not the necessarily extreme standpoints. It's just stuff that happens in life. So I think, that's kind of been some of my ambition, knowing that I think I have a good ability to at least try to connect with people in that point.
Well, and I think when I think about you and what will make you such an incredible addition to the judiciary, it is the immense level of compassion that I've seen you exercise in our dealings with different clients. And when I think back at my career as an attorney, there's 3 or 4 situations with judges where I lost cases, both in immigration court and criminal court, where my clients were sentenced to prison or sentenced deported. And yet their experience with the judge was so compassionate on a human level. I remember being in immigration court and having a judge say, I know this is going to be hard for your family, and I'm incredibly empathetic to what you're going through as a human, and legally I cannot not deny your case. And there's this level of humanity that comes with that, of saying, I know you're human, and also I can't grant your case at the same time, or I know you're human, and also prison is what we're doing. That the only way you make it through that is compassion. And I think you represent that skill so well.
Thank you. I think it's just one of those things, looking at it, that whatever you want to consider that higher power, whatever your thought process is just really trying to connect to that, and knowing that it's tough because people are dealing with things that are going to impact them and their families for the rest of their life. And being able to just work through that, because at the end of the day, being a judge, you have to follow the rule of law. But I think if there are components available on all ends of the equation where there's discretion, taking that compassion component in, and it can be on either side collectively, but using some of that where the discretion is allowed and following the law. It's just a human component, right? I mean, it's just from the standpoint of whatever shoe, if it's the accused, if it's the family or victims, putting yourself in those people's shoes, putting yourself in the shoes of the community, and then just it's tough because you start to think, my God, if that was happened to me, whatever given circumstance, to process that. And so, I mean, I compliment, the vast majority of judges that, I've been acquainted with, because it's one hell of a thing to have to go through. And then also recognizing, you got to live with that, that decision, that ruling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such I mean, I think people forget we're human, both as attorneys, as judges, as
maybe
professionals.
Ourselves.
Yeah. Just this moment of like, I am going, I mean, you've said it a couple times on the show, do the best that you can with what you have. Like, I'm going to do like a judge has to do the best they can with what they know and have. And then you get like eaten alive. Like it frustrates me when I'm scrolling social media. I mean, I probably just shouldn't scroll social media, but it frustrates me when I'm scrolling social media. Like what's in my head right now recently is the DUI death where he was just sentenced to prison 2 to 6 years. And you read the comments on that and it's like 2 to 6 years, like remember elections are coming up and blah, blah, blah. And people don't realize that 2 to 6 was the max in that situation. Like, so judges are getting eaten alive by people who don't understand the legal side of it. And we've got to maintain this compassion for the profession, for the people, for all of it. And then we've got to maintain humanity at the same time. It's in this incredible balance I don't know is possible.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is it's just life out there. And I say that because like when you bring up like the maximum time or this judge or that one, for us to be able to really go in depth, like as a human, to say, I'm going to look at this particular case where I just scrolled on social media and got this news blot that, hey, this is what the outcome was, but to actually become familiar and, not just almost be like respectfully, like a Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more that's involved with it, but we live in such, our society is just such that we're so fast-paced. We have to be, for instance, like at 2 places at once. I'm in the one court in person here, and then a court, in Henderson downtown. I'm appearing remotely, so the ability to actually take, time to absorb and get what's going on in a particular matter is really difficult for us, as where I guess humanity is right now, just because there's just so much out there that can be given to you, but you only have this so much time to process it all. And it's the same thing. It's going to be the same thing, for instance, like with the upcoming 2026 election for judges, because there's almost 60 district court judges that are up for election. And then you start looking at the justice courts and the municipal courts. Respectfully, how does a voter be able to understand who they're going to be voting for with all this limited time and window? And again, then things start coming out on social media that you're scrolling through, and it's like, have you really taken that time and effort to process that decision? And believe me, the human component, I get it as well. It's extremely difficult. So, again, it's just one of those things I think is we as where we're at human wise in our society certainly should be something to work on, but understand the extreme difficulty because of having to do so much with such potentially a limited amount of a window. Maybe the only thing you could perhaps say is, look, before you throw out judgment or your opinions, you think for a minute before you throw it out there. How much do I really know? How much do I really know about this particular circumstance? Granted, it's beautiful. People can throw out their opinion in that sense, but just keeping in mind that when you do put it out there, you yourself are putting it out there. So just process, mindfulness, thoughtful decisions and opinions before you just put it out there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm curious about, because I think this is something that so many people deal with in all areas of life, especially when they're trying to reinvent themselves in their personal or professional life, is not only the identities that we hold on to, but the identities other people perceive of us. So as you're putting yourself out there on the campaign trail and you've had this career as a criminal defense attorney, what has the experience been for you of kind of normalizing that fairness aspect rather than it just being this perception that you're going to be a criminal defense attorney on the bench?
I think that's the important reason why going out and meeting with people is really important. And even if their initial impression is, oh, he's a criminal defense attorney, look, there's things in life that I can do the best at, and then there's things in life that I have no control over. So if somebody wants to have, if they're hell-bent and they've got that decision ultimately and made those opinions, I'm not going to be able to necessarily change that other than I'm willing to talk with you. I want to be able to have that opportunity so you can at least know me. And I know it's difficult because, they're short window meeting introductions. And I'm trying to see a way to work on expanding that, talking with more people and continuing that kind of a relationship so they get to know me better. But again, time is limited, right? You can only do so much that it becomes that difficult process. And then what happens is, okay, your identity is based upon everything you've done through this legal profession. Oh, and by the way, you're the criminal defense attorney. So that's where my head is at.
Yeah.
And, I just have to be able to accept that and do the best that I can to try to let people know I'm human. I'm doing what I've taken an oath for to zealously and ethically represent my client. And if given an opportunity for taking the bench, I would put the same amount of, work effort into the process of being a judge. But I can't necessarily change, I guess, some preconceived prejudices and biases that somebody might have based upon, kind of my professional track record history. That's just one of the things that I do the best I can. But if I don't have control over somebody's mind, I'm not looking to steer them away other than saying, hey, please, look more information about me and let's talk more. But if they want to just shun me right away, kind of the beautiful thing about that process is it's our own identity and our own opinion of the political process that they're free to have that though too.
Yeah.
So I don't want to force it and saying you're going to. That's life. And that's kind of a weird, beautiful thing that kind of why we don't have a perfect system, but we try to achieve the best that we can. And I think that's what allows that.
Yeah. It's interesting because we talk a lot in the work that I do about the perceptions that we put out into the world for others. So people, like, I know you in a certain way, people know me in a certain way, and you could line up 15 people and they'd all describe me and you differently because they know us all differently, right? And when I think about a criminal defense attorney on the bench, I laugh because I'm like, every excuse gets thrown in a courtroom is an excuse we've heard. And so it's like you hear it and you're like, yeah, but I've heard that from like 7 clients, right? Which might not be the same perspective that somebody who doesn't interact with clients on a day-to-day basis hears. So I think in my mind, it's actually a strength because there's this bullshit filter of like, the one that comes to mind all the time that people don't believe is like the it's not my pants defense, right?
Right.
So like when we're talking to people and they're lay people and they're like, nobody would ever say they're not their pants. And I'm like, I can't count on my fingers the amount of times that I've read not my pants in a police report.
Yep.
Like all day. So it's that bullshit filter of like, I hear what you're saying, but I've heard it like 10 times this week.
Yeah, I do think there's a certain attribute that comes into play doing, being the criminal defense attorney and understanding that you're going to hear some of the, lack of a better term, the bullshit term, I'll just throw it out there. And, you try to hear everything and put it into perspective. And yeah, you doing the criminal defense work, you're pretty good at sniffing out that bullshit kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's, this is a business podcast, and a lot of people might be looking at this going, what was the purpose of bringing on a political conversation in a business podcast? But I think there's so much that people can learn about sales, communication, and leadership and business from you. And especially from this decision to run for judge. I mean, you've said so many things on this show that I think are so incredibly valuable about not being able to change other people's opinions and, finding some harmony in your life and figuring out what matters to you and how you're going to make decisions to decide what's important. And I just hope that the people listening to this show see the parallels in life and what you're dealing with in the judicial process, because I would never want to campaign. Like opening up my life to somebody and saying, dig through it.
Can I just go on that a little bit then too? So it has been an interesting process, and I've come across scenarios where, and I get it, people may not want to necessarily engage, and I respect that. It hurts the feelings, again, being human, to process that. But, it's just life. And then there's other experiences where, some of the outfits and organizations that I work with for community engagement, I have now, through the campaign process, learned of other organizations that exist. I talk with them and say, hey, have you heard about what this outfit does? And it creates this network. And it's something where it's a true blessing, though, that I've experienced even through this short window of the process. And like with life, you take the good with the bad. It's coming the same thing with the campaign process. So you just try to balance that and understand that, hey, again, things could be hunky dory. Shit happens sometimes, though, too, and you just do what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Do what you can do. I think that I'm super excited to see what this journey looks like for you. I've said it a couple times, and I'll say it again, that I think that you'll be an incredible addition to the judiciary. I think that you would take care of this community very well. And, whether... And I know you're going to continue to take care of the community, whether you end up doing it from the bench or as an attorney.
100%.
I've watched you volunteer. I've watched you, support your family. And I'm so grateful for your friendship. And I know I've said that before, but I'm so grateful for your friendship. And I think you'll be a great addition to the judiciary. And I hope that ends up being the path for you.
You're a great friend as well, Amber. And again, it's life, the way that we got here and how we cross paths. That's just the beauty of life.
Yeah. So for those that are listening to this that might be struggling with putting themselves out there, struggling with doing sales or marketing campaigns, what advice do you have for them in putting themselves in the public eye for judgment, for lack of a better word?
There's always going to be difficult times, and a lot of the times it may happen on the front end because you're trying to learn about what you're undertaking. I think the important thing is to continue to endure. I think there are going to be individuals out there that you're going to meet that are going to connect with you. That's going to be your support outfit that you can rely upon. But just know that it's understandable to have the anxiety, the nervousness, being scared. That's being a human. Mm-hmm. But I think being able to work with that, being able to somehow take that on, knowing there are going to be benefits because you have an ambitious goal, wanting to having some type of success, that there's going to be a lot of things that come around your way that are going to be, whether it's lifelong experiences, positive for you, friendship, try to, go ahead and do it, and know there's going to be tough times, but life's tough generally speaking. So why not have that objective, that goal, that ambition to give it a shot, and do it responsibly, do it ethically, do it for the greater good for people. And regardless of whether you achieve perhaps that potential ambition for opening your own business or trying to get a certain position with your employment and it doesn't necessarily pan out, because again, there's things that we can't control. You're going to get some kind of life experience, and there are going to be positive things that once you reflect upon, even with the stuff that may have been negative, that are going to outweigh that. And just continue to endure and hug somebody, really,
Yeah.
just be able to let yourself be human and hug somebody.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that. I'm reminded of a story that somebody shared on social media that he mentioned he thought was too vulnerable to share. But he shared it anyways and it went viral. He was in a grocery store and he saw somebody who looked like his mom, and his mom had just passed away. And every ounce of him wanted to go up to this person and be like, you remind me of my mom. Like, can I just hug you? And he didn't. And then he got back in his car and he was like, do you know, if I would have actually walked up to that person, how grateful they may have felt to have been able to been a part of easing somebody else's pain. And I think often we don't want to burden other people with what we're going through, so we don't ask, when in reality, most people would be more than happy to be a part of that. So when you said hug somebody, that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yep.
So, well, with that being said, Lance, I greatly appreciate you coming on the show. If anybody listening wants to follow up, either because of anything you've said from a human standpoint or more about your campaign or what you're doing in the community, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So they can go on my website. It's www.lance4judge.com. They can also email me. It's lance@lance4judge.com. They can also give me a call or shoot me a text. My cell number is 702-483-8181. And again, looking forward to connecting with people. I'm doing my very best to stay on top of anyone that does reach out, because again, I think there's going to be things I don't even recognize now of great people that I'm going to come across that I'm looking forward to.
I love that. That will all be in the show notes as well. So if you're listening to this and you didn't catch that, you can go click the links in the show notes. Lance, thanks so much for coming on. As always, been an incredible conversation with you.
Thanks, Amber. Once we cut off, I'm going to give you a hug then too, because we get that.
I appreciate
get
that.
good
I
vibe
need it.
going. So do I.
All right.